Nobody could have imagined that the stifling night in Lagos would become the dividing line between life and death, wealth and misery. Chike Obi, a millionaire surrounded by luxury and power, saw his world collapse in seconds when masked men cornered him. But what no one would ever believe is that his salvation would come from the hands of Amara, the most despised beggar in the city, a woman invisible to everyone, except to fate. The heat of that night in Lagos clung to the skin like a second layer of clothing. The air, heavy with dust, mingled with the smell of gasoline, while the city still pulsed with honking horns, street preachers, and voices echoing from food stalls. Chike Obi, the businessman many called the King of Hotels, observed everything through the tinted window of his armored SUV. The glass reflected his own image, a man who believed he had achieved absolute control over life. But on that stifling night, control was about to slip from his grasp. The vehicle moved steadily through the avenues until the unexpected happened. A makeshift barricade appeared ahead, constructed from metal drums and charred wood, as if it were just another common protest barrier in Nigeria's streets. But this time the intent was different. Masked men emerged from the darkness, guns in hand, banging on the vehicle's frame, demanding the driver stop immediately. The tense silence inside the car shattered the moment Chike's breathing grew heavy, betraying the fear he had never allowed himself to show in public. Accustomed to navigating meetings where millions were decided in seconds, the tycoon realized there was no contract or bodyguard sufficient to intervene now. The door was brutally yanked open, and strong hands pulled him out. His body, used to expensive suits and air-conditioned rooms, felt the hot asphalt against his Italian shoes. For the first time in years, the city's powerful man understood that wealth offered no protection when death approached in silence. Across the street, almost invisible amidst cardboard scraps, a frail silhouette watched the scene. Amara, known to passers-by as the madwoman of the bridge, was seen daily begging for coins to buy cheap water bottles and stale bread. Many averted their gaze, as if her existence were a stain on the urban landscape. But on that night, her weary eyes, which had witnessed so much misery, injustice, and abandonment, saw something even more dangerous: the fall of one of the city's most untouchable men. The scene seemed too improbable to be real. The hotel millionaire held hostage by masked men in the heart of Lagos, with the only witness being the woman everyone treated as invisible. The dust kicked up by tires, muffled screams, and the metallic clank of weapons created a cruel symphony, each detail exposing the fragility of life. Curiously, there are records of similar cases in Lagos, where kidnapped businessmen didn't have the same luck. Stories that fueled the collective fear that fortune and power are no guarantee of safety. This memory crossed Amara's mind, who understood the weight of injustice better than anyone. Chike, shoved against the concrete wall of an alley, tried to rationalize the situation. He thought of amounts he could offer to save himself, but in certain moments money isn't the accepted currency. Sweat dripped down his forehead, not just from the stifling heat, but from the stark realization that his life was in the hands of those masked men. His heart, accustomed to beating steadily in luxurious ballrooms and gala dinners, now raced like that of any ordinary man cornered by urban violence. Meanwhile, Amara didn't look away. That man in the expensive suit, who had so often passed by in gleaming SUVs without noticing the crowd of destitute under the bridge, was now at the mercy of fate. Part of her considered turning away, pretending she saw nothing, as the entire city did with her. But a deeper, more wounded and resilient part knew that letting an innocent be dragged away would add yet another burden to her conscience. Life had already taken everything from her, but it hadn't stripped her courage, and in that moment of hesitation, the line between power and weakness blurred. On one side, a millionaire reduced to raw vulnerability. On the other, a despised beggar about to decide whether to remain invisible or become part of history. The stifling night in Lagos bore witness not just to an ambush, but to the improbable meeting of two destinies that never should have crossed. While Lagos sleeps, unlikely fates collide. And in African Village Story, you follow every detail of this journey that could be yours. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications to live each chapter with us. The alley was dimly lit, with only an old flickering street lamp casting shadows that made the masked men even more menacing. Hurried footsteps echoed on the uneven ground as the millionaire was shoved mercilessly toward the alley. To any distracted passerby, it would seem like just another scene of urban violence, common in Lagos. But for Amara, there was something different. It wasn't just a rich man being taken. It was a rare opportunity to prove that, even in invisibility, there was still strength within her. Under the damp cardboard she used as a bed, her heart raced like a war drum. Since losing her possessions to her brother-in-law, she had learned to live with others' indifference, but she never grew accustomed to injustice. Every night under the bridge, she dreamed of turning her own story upside down. Now, before her, was a scene no one would believe. One of Lagos's most powerful men, held hostage just meters away, while everyone around carried on as if nothing were happening. The scene took an unexpected turn when one of the kidnappers, in his haste to drag the victim, slipped in a puddle of oil leaking from an abandoned barrel. The metallic clatter of the gun hitting the ground echoed like thunder. For a moment, the world seemed to pause, and in that void Amara found courage. Her hands trembled, but her eyes shone with determination. She grabbed a sharp stone and with all her strength hurled it at the criminals while letting out piercing screams that cut through the silence of the night. The reaction was immediate. Dogs began barking in distant houses, windows opened with curiosity, and the disoriented kidnappers lost precious seconds trying to figure out where the threat was coming from. In the chaos, the millionaire seized the opportunity. Without thinking twice, he ran toward the street, stumbling but determined to escape the ambush that could cost him his life. Each step felt like a defiance of fate, a reminder that no matter how much money he had, he wouldn't have gained those seconds of survival on his own. The escape, however, wouldn't be simple. Lagos at night is a labyrinth of alleys and narrow streets, where every turn could lead to a dead end. It was at that moment that the businessman's desperate eyes met Amara's. The woman, wrapped in rags and dust, extended her hand without hesitation. There was no time for questions. He took her hand, and the two dashed through the alley. Guided by shortcuts only someone who lived in the shadows would know. They passed through damp corridors covered in graffiti, cut through paths behind makeshift markets, and even leapt over piles of garbage blocking passages. As he ran, Chiki felt the strength of an unlikely guide. That same despised beggar, ignored every day of her life, knew every loose stone, every dangerous corner, every hiding place invisible to those who always traveled in armored cars. And it was precisely that experience that kept him safe. In a matter of minutes, the city that seemed like a hunting ground for the kidnappers became a terrain of advantage for Amara. With each shortcut, the distance between them and the masked men grew. As paradoxical as it was, the millionaire discovered that his life now depended on the very woman society treated as trash, and that revelation was just the first of many shocks to come. And you, would you have the courage to risk everything for a stranger? Comment yes or no below. Let's talk about it. The makeshift shelter smelled of wet wood smoke and food scraps. Torn foam mattresses were scattered on the floor, shared by exhausted bodies seeking refuge from the cold of dawn. Among them, Amara sat upright, with a dignity that stood out in the environment. Chiki, still in shock from the previous night, observed her every gesture. There was firmness in her tone, clarity in her words, something that clashed with the city's image of her as mad. His intuition told him he wasn't facing just any beggar. When the sun finally rose behind the buildings, painting the rusted rooftops golden, the millionaire's curiosity became unbearable. He needed to understand how someone with such lucidity had ended up there, among the city's forgotten. He sat nearby and without preamble asked her to tell her story. Amara looked away, took a deep breath, and for a moment seemed to wrestle with her own memories. But at his insistence, she opened her heart. Each word came out as if it had been held in silence for years. Before being reduced to rags, Amara had been a teacher at a community school in the countryside. She was known for her warm smile and passion for teaching children who barely had notebooks to write in. She had inherited a small family, property, grew corn and cassava, and dreamed of opening an educational center for orphaned youth. That vision of the future was brutally interrupted when her older brother died in an unexpected accident, leaving her vulnerable to the worst betrayal. Her sister-in-law Ngozi took advantage of the grief and fragility to orchestrate a silent coup. With forged documents and the complicity of corrupt registry officials, she managed to transfer the property to her own name. When Amara tried to contest it, she was ridiculed, accused of being mentally unstable after her brother's death. The society that should have listened to her preferred to believe Ngozi's convenient version. What could have been a mere legal dispute became a sentence of invisibility. With no family to defend her, no money to hire influential lawyers, she was pushed to the margins of life. She sought help from local leaders, but was met with cutting remarks. A woman alone has no voice. That day, Amara understood how the system was designed to crush the vulnerable. This experience sadly wasn't rare. Countless similar cases in Nigeria show women stripped of their inheritance by in-laws, neighbors, or even strangers, with the law failing to protect them adequately. Chike listened in silence, feeling the weight of each word. For a man who always believed in individual merit and the power of money, it was jarring to see how someone could be stripped of a dignified life by a simple forgery accepted as truth. The contrast was cruel. While he spent millions on parties and business trips, a woman like Amara slept under bridges for trusting a blind system. The revelation made it clear that before him was more than a beggar. She was a victim of the same social gears he helped perpetuate with his own indifference. As she revealed the traitor's name, Amara's eyes gleamed with contained fury. Ngozi, she repeated firmly, as if spitting out years of pent-up venom. It wasn't just the story of stolen property. It was the story of a crushed destiny by hands that should have offered care. And in that moment, Chike realized it wasn't just about helping her. It was about confronting an entire system that fed on the silence of people like her. Betrayal from one's own blood or a crime by strangers, which hurts more? Comment below. The mansion in Victoria Island woke to the usual bustle of staff, gardeners, and uniformed drivers. The sun reflected off the glass facade, reminding the world of the power of those who lived there. Yet neither luxury nor security could restore peace to Chike's heart. The newspapers headlined the attack from the previous night, but credit was given only to the actions of private security. Not a single line mentioned the woman who risked her life to save him. That omission weighed like a stone on his conscience. While reading the society columns, filled with speculation about million-dollar deals, his gaze kept drifting to the memory of the frail figure hidden under cardboard, an uncomfortable image that refused to leave him. There was something in Amara that couldn't be summed up in rags and dust. Wounded but intact dignity. It was as if the newspaper's silence was an amplified portrait of the injustice she had carried for years, and that became unbearable for a man who always believed his power could solve everything. Driven by unease, Chike decided to act. He ordered his driver to take him back to the bridge, where the traffic of street vendors mixed. With the smells of suya, roasted corn, and burnt oil, he walked among curious stares, a rare sight for someone used to being seen only at gala events. He searched for signs of her in every corner until he finally found her sitting, sharing a piece of bread with two street children. The scene dismantled any remaining barriers. He approached, and for the first time, there was no millionaire and beggar, just two human beings facing an uncomfortable truth. After hearing her story again, this time, without interruptions, he made a decision that surprised even Amara. He wouldn't allow her to remain forgotten. He would put all his resources to work in her fight. In the following days, he used contacts in registries, gathered old documents, and hired the city's best lawyers. Soon evidence began to emerge, revealing that Ngozi had indeed manipulated records with the help of corrupt officials. Chike's indignation grew with each new discovery, turning his promise into a personal mission. During that time, Lagos buzzed only about the tycoon's business and the scandal of the attack, but no one knew of the true battle unfolding behind the scenes. While the city slept, lawyers prepared petitions, investigators gathered testimonies, and the empire Ngozi had built on fraud began to crumble. For Amara, who until recently slept under bridges, it was almost surreal to watch someone so powerful move mountains for her. It was as if the world suddenly said, "You have a voice again." The twist didn't stop there. Chike brought her to his own home, a decision that shocked staff and even close family. It wasn't just a gesture of gratitude, it was a statement against injustice. Crossing the mansion's iron gates, Amara felt each step was a break from the narrative society had imposed on her. For the first time in years, she slept in a room with solid walls and clean glass windows. But deep down, she knew comfort wasn't victory. The real fight was just beginning. If you had the power to change the fate of someone wronged, would you? Comment below. The Lagos courtroom turned into a stage for a spectacle that felt more like a political drama than a dispute over inheritance. Journalists packed the corridors, Cameras jostled for space, and every move Amara made was scrutinized as if she were a public figure. Not long ago, she was just a shadow ignored under the bridge. Now, everyone wanted a closer look at the woman daring to confront one of the community's most influential figures. This contrast sparked a paradoxical feeling, pride and fear at the same time. Ngozi arrived at the first hearing in a luxurious car, surrounded by supporters, exuding rehearsed confidence. Dressed in expensive clothes, she smiled for photographers and waved as if she were a political leader. Her strategy was clear: maintain an image of respectability to drown out her opponent's voice. It didn't take long for her lawyers to try delaying the process with endless appeals, while behind the scenes rumors surfaced of discreet envelopes passed to judges and officials. The old practice of corruption tried to assert itself once again. The attacks weren't limited to the courtroom. Rumors began circulating in markets, local radios, and even churches. They said Amara was unstable, that she had lost her sanity after her brother's death. Some repeated the accusations without thinking, like gossip passed without checking the source. This kind of social manipulation is common in Nigeria's power disputes, where honor often outweighs evidence. For Amara, hearing her name used as an insult was an open wound, but she remained steadfast, sustained by the certainty that she now had someone by her side willing to fight to the end. Cheek watched it all with growing indignation. Throughout his career, he had seen plenty of dirty games behind the scenes of business, but nothing as blatant as what he witnessed here. He decided it wasn't enough to trust the system. He mobilized his international network, brought in independent experts, and retrieved original documents from old databases. Each piece of evidence presented in court dismantled another lie, until Ngozi's constructed narrative began to crumble before everyone's eyes. The tensest moment came when a former registry employee, initially bought by the scheme, decided to testify. With a trembling voice, he confessed to being paid to alter records, directly naming Ngozi. The revelation hit like thunder. For a moment, the courtroom fell into absolute silence, broken only by the sound of reporters typing frantically. There, the scales of justice began to tip in Amara's favor, showing that no matter how dirty the game, there was still room for truth to prevail. For the first time, Amara didn't see herself as a passive victim. Sitting in the courtroom chair, she held her head high, as if finally reclaiming her own voice. Each testimony validated her pain. Each document restored a piece of her stolen dignity. The audience, once divided, began to lean in her favor. What once seemed impossible, facing and defeating an untouchable figure like Ngozi, now became plausible, and that changed everything. The legal process demanded near-daily meetings, lawyer consultations, court appearances, and conversations late into the night. In this forced proximity, Chike began to see beyond the appearance of the woman who saved his life. Every sentence from Amara carried not just pain, but also wisdom gained from years of survival. It was like listening to someone who, despite losing everything, still preserved the ability to believe in new beginnings. The millionaire found himself facing a strength money could never buy. In conversations in the mansion's garden, Amara spoke of the days when she taught in makeshift classrooms with broken desks, yet managed to inspire children to dream. She recounted small victories from the past, like a student's smile upon reading for the first time. Chike, used to measuring success in numbers and closed deals, fell silent, reflecting on how life could be grander in seemingly small details. It was in this contrast that initial respect began to turn into deep admiration. On the other hand, Amara also discovered layers the city never saw. Chike's public image was always tied to wealth, lavish parties, and million-dollar contracts. Yet in moments of vulnerability, she noticed loneliness in his eyes. A man surrounded by security and sycophants, but with no one to share. A silence is with. This discovery awakened something unexpected in her. Empathy followed by a quiet tenderness that grew each day. Small gestures became revealing. Seeing her buried in a pile of documents, Chike served coffee without being asked. Noticing his exhaustion after long hearings, Amara softly sang an Igbo folk song she used to teach children, drawing a genuine smile from him, perhaps his first in weeks. These simple, everyday details were the first bricks in building a deeper bond. In Nigeria, there's a popular saying, "It's in the storm that you recognize who stays." The legal battle was that storm, and the two found each other as safe harbors. Nights of legal strategy turned into confidences, and confidences into lingering glances, hard to disguise. What began as an alliance for justice took on the contours of something stronger, impossible to explain solely by gratitude. Over the months, the line between protector and protected dissolved. There was no longer a millionaire and a beggar, but two human beings rebuilding themselves through each other's company. Respect no longer sufficed to define what they felt. There was a new warmth in their gestures, an anticipation in each meeting, as if both their hearts had found a reason to beat stronger again. It was only a matter of time before silent admiration turned into declared love. If you're rooting for this unlikely couple, comment, "I'm rooting." Let's see how many are cheering for them. The courtroom was packed. When the judge struck the gavel, officially declaring that Ngozi's documents were forged, the sharp sound echoed like thunder, ending years of pain and injustice. For a moment, Amara sat motionless, as if unable to believe what she had just heard. Only when she looked into Chike's steady, emotional eyes did she realize she was no longer invisible. Justice had found her. The crowd in the courtroom erupted in a buzz, some shocked, others smiling discreetly, as if they too had won by watching her rise against those who crushed her. In the following days, newspapers that once ignored her splashed headlines about the woman who defeated a prominent community figure. Photographers tried to capture her face, reporters sought interviews, and even religious leaders used her example in sermons about resilience. But amid the euphoria, Amara did something no one expected. Upon recovering her rightful possessions, she announced she would donate part of the land and income to create a support program for homeless women. The gesture surprised many, but for her it wasn't charity. It was extended justice, a way to ensure other Amaras wouldn't be forgotten. This decision reignited discussions in Lagos. Many recalled that, according to local statistics, a large portion of homeless people were women abandoned after losing family or victims of similar property scams. Her act of giving back not only boosted her credibility, but turned her into a symbol of hope. Suddenly, the name once tied to madness now represented dignity, and that completely changed how society saw her. While Amara became news, Chike took an even bolder step. He invited her to live in his mansion, not as a temporary guest, but as an integral part of his life. For him, it made no sense for someone so extraordinary to be left on the margins again. The move shocked staff and family, sparking whispered comments in high society's corridors. Many couldn't understand why the millionaire who could have any woman chose the one once called a beggar. But crossing the mansion's gates with her, Chike made it clear he didn't see her as charity, but as the woman who changed his destiny forever. Their first social event together was a turning point. A charity gala brought together businessmen, politicians, and public figures. When Amara entered arm in arm with Chike, the room fell silent for seconds. Her clothes were no longer rags, but her proud bearing remained that of someone who knew the value of her own struggle. Murmurs rippled through the space. Some praised the couple's courage, others whispered veiled criticisms. Still, nothing stopped all eyes from being on her, the woman who in so little time had gone from shadows to light. In his speech that night, Chike didn't talk about business or the hotel chain that made him famous. He declared to everyone that his life had been saved by someone the entire city despised. Pointing to Amara, he stated that without her courage, he would be dead. His words landed like a silent slap on every face that once ignored her. For many in attendance, it was the first time they saw the beggar from the bridge as a heroine. For others, it was an invitation to discomfort, realizing that greatness can come precisely from those who were trampled. Back at the mansion, away from the spotlight, Amara stared at her reflection in the mirror. What she saw wasn't just a woman who had recovered material possessions, but someone who had reclaimed her own identity. Her shy smile revealed gratitude, but also the awareness that there was still much to build, and with Chike by her side, that new beginning no longer seemed impossible. He, in turn, discovered that the greatest investment of his life wasn't in hotels, but in the quiet love growing day by day with the woman who gave him not just life, but its meaning. Thus, the victory wasn't limited to the legal win. It became a public and intimate rebirth. Amara didn't return to her old life alone. She returned, hand in hand with someone who deep down had also been rescued. And before society, she went from being the invisible beggar to the face of hope, not just for herself, but for all who once believed they were forgotten. The story of Chike and Amara began in the darkness. under the threat of death and violence, but blossomed before the entire city as an unlikely testament to love. What many thought was fleeting gratitude revealed itself to be something deeper. The relationship, initially built around a legal battle and a fight for justice, turned into bonds of complicity that no title, fortune, or scandal could erase. And little by little, the society that once despised Amara had to learn to recognize her not as the beggar from the bridge, but as the partner of Lagos's most powerful man. In the mansion, the once silent corridors gained new life. The sound of firm footsteps gave way to long conversations and unexpected laughter. Staff, once skeptical, grew to respect the presence of the woman who, beyond kindness, treated everyone as equals. She walked through the gardens not as someone dazzled by wealth, but as someone carrying the simplicity of street life in every gesture. That authenticity captivated not just Chike, but everyone around, showing that it wasn't luxury that defined her, but the dignity she never lost. The differences between them, which many saw as barriers, became bridges. Amara taught Chike to look beyond numbers, showing him stories of abandoned children, unprotected widows, and youth without opportunity. In return, he showed her how to use power and influence to turn compassion into real impact. Together, they created social programs funding schools, shelters, and training courses. Lagos, accustomed to hearing only about million-dollar contracts, now talked about the projects of an unlikely couple daring to turn pain into hope. Intimate moments revealed even more of this love's strength. One night, sitting on the veranda after a simple dinner, Amara recalled the day she was called crazy when no one believed her word. Chike held her hands and replied, "That was the day the city lost, but it was in that alley that I found you." Those words, spoken without grandeur, showed that their relationship wasn't built on appearances but on shared scars. And it was precisely those scars that made their bond so real. Over time, the two became an inspiration. Newspapers that once reported only scandals now published stories about the couple that defied social conventions. Churches used their story in sermons about forgiveness and new beginnings. At social events, criticisms gave way to applause, though some disdainful glances lingered. The difference was that those glances no longer had the power to bring them down. The couple walked side by side, showing that true love isn't built in the absence of pain, but in the ability to transform it into something greater. Their wedding was discreet, far from the excesses typical of Nigeria's elite. There were no fireworks or red carpets, but there was truth in every detail. They invited children from shelters, former beggars, and people who once shared the same patch of sidewalk with Amara. In that celebration, the wealth wasn't in gold or champagne, but in the presence of those who knew the value of hope. For many, it was the moment they realized the improbable could indeed be eternal. In daily life, they continued to write chapters that seemed straight out of a novel. Simple walks through popular markets, visits to public schools, meals shared with poor communities, gestures that humanized a millionaire and elevated a former beggar to a natural leader. All of Lagos followed this silent spectacle, and many said their love didn't just unite two people, but challenged the very logic of a system that usually separates worlds. Thus, what began as an unlikely encounter on a stifling night ended as a union no one could have predicted. The despised beggar and the powerful millionaire discovered in love a wealth no money could buy. The happy ending wasn't just in material comfort, but in the fact that together they turned pain into hope. And for those who witnessed this story up close, it left the certainty that sometimes fate chooses paths that defy reason, but touch the heart deeply. This story shows that the improbable isn't just possible, it can be life's most beautiful turning point. Amara, seen as invisible and called crazy, carried a strength the world tried to silence. Chike, despite his wealth and power, bore an emptiness no fortune could fill. Their meeting was more than chance. It was a reminder that fate manifests in the most unlikely places, and often, it's in pain that the greatest miracles arise. How many Amaras are out there today, forgotten on the streets carrying stories no one hears? And how many Chikes, surrounded by luxury, haven't yet realized that true wealth lies not in what's accumulated, but in what's shared? This unlikely union teaches us that love and justice walk hand in hand, and when courage meets compassion, the impossible stops being just a dream and becomes reality. In the end, the story of Chike and Amara is an invitation to look beyond appearances, because sometimes those the world rejects are the ones who hold the key to transforming destinies. Some stories aren't about wealth, but about dignity reborn where no one believed it could. Amara didn't return to prove greatness. She returned to show that hope can rise even under forgotten bridges. Because when courage meets justice, even the hardest heart learns to love again. And when an improbable love blossoms, the entire city bows before the power of a destiny that refused to give up. New stories are coming, so click the video below and live this new emotion. Until then.